Hello, everybody. Welcome. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending upon where in the world you are. I am very excited to be with you today to talk about a framework on how you can choose the best business schools for you, because it's a very individualized decision. And we'll talk about some of the things that you can do in order to help create and collate the best list for you. So let's just quickly who I am. My name's Melissa, and I'm a senior admissions consultant at Stratus. I'd like to talk a little bit about why I got into admissions counseling. Part of the reason was I was an alumni interviewer for about a decade with Haas. And often when I was interviewing someone, I'd feel like there was a nugget of information that I was trying to find, and I wanted to hop on the other side of the table and help them out. So I found a way to do that. So, I love working with people, helping them find their specific story, why an MBA is right for them, and find the right list of schools as well. So just a little bit about Stratus. A couple things that are unique about us is we have a team-based approach. You have an individual counselor that you work with, but we pull in different people on our team with expertise in that school along the way. And, we work with hundreds of people every year and look forward to answering questions you have. So, thanks, Akshay, for saying hello. Good evening to you. Please use the comments if you have questions. I'll try and address them as we go along if they pertain to what we're talking about, but we'll definitely come back towards the end and try and clean up any other questions there are. So what we're going to talk about, we're going to start with career goals just because it is a crucial part of you identifying what the best goals are for you. And then we're going to talk about our 6 C's that can help you narrow in. And then we can talk a little bit more about Stratus. All right. So career goals. Many people come to this process knowing they want an MBA. Some people come with a specific career goal in mind. It is important and helpful for you to spend some time in this process identifying what it is you want from the MBA. So are you in finance now as an investment manager and wanting to move into fintech? Maybe as a product manager. Part of the reason this is important is schools, it helps provide, number one, a framework for you to do research in schools, which we'll talk about. But schools are looking, admissions teams are looking for, can their school help you? And can they help you achieve your goals? And if you are uncertain of your goals or not clear, it's very difficult for them to assess whether or not they can help you. So schools know all the time that career goals change. You get into school, something is exciting, but through your applications, you want to have a clear set of goals. And it could be, while you're doing your research, it could be a couple goals. But once you get to the application process, you're going to want to have a specific kind of short and long-term goal that you're speaking to so that you can show that you've done the research of the schools and how they can help you get there. All right. So we're going to walk through our 6 C's. The first one is competitiveness. So this is kind of how your profile compares with the profile of a school. So, I'm going to use the magic number of 6 as we go through this exercise on, how many schools you might apply to in a given round or a given year. Just makes my math a little bit easy, but I can adjust and we can talk about how that could adjust. If you were looking, I feel like people come to this process with two kind of a continuum of goals. One group of people are, I only want to go to school if I get into a certain school. And the other side of the continuum would be, I absolutely want to get my MBA next year. So that's going to adjust kind of the list of schools that you might come up with. If you are looking for a well-balanced list of schools, we like to suggest 2 stretch schools, 2 target schools, and 2 safety schools. This is going to give you, greater assurance. There's no assurance through this process, but greater assurance that you are going to have an option. And in a perfect world, I love for my clients to have an option between maybe a more competitive school that tend to have less scholarships versus maybe a safety school that's going to help you achieve your goals with a significant scholarship, and you're making that decision between. So a way for you to judge your competitiveness is looking across. We think about kind of 5 different characteristics that schools look at. So there's the quantitative competitiveness. So that's your test score, your GPA, kind of the quantitative nature of your work, your work experience, your community involvement, kind of your global experience, and then really your career goals. And so, for example, all schools are going to have a profile online that will tell you kind of the average student. Now, there is no average student. From a quant perspective, you can do that. But you can look and see if you are in a, if you're in finance, you can look at the percentage of other applicants or people that made it into the class actually who are in finance, and you can understand kind of if there's a big pool or if you're competing for a smaller pool. So if you are, we would define stretch schools, so kind of those top 2 that you might apply to, as where your stats might be below kind of the average of that school, a target you're going to be on, and a safety you're going to be slightly above. So there was a question about kind of a computer science teacher, 58 years old. So from an MBA perspective, you're going to be looking for more of an executive program with that years of experience. So years of experience would also be something from a competitive standpoint. Full-time programs tend to be looking for people 3 to 7 years of work experience. Part-time or evening weekend programs could be anywhere 5 to 15, and then executive programs tend to be looking for people with a minimum of 15 years of experience. So I brought in some examples just to kind of talk through that, will hopefully give you an idea. Maybe you can find a little bit of yourself in some of these examples to help think about your competitiveness. So this is a client who came to us. She had applied to Columbia the year before and had not been admitted. She hadn't done much research, kind of put in her application, and we really encouraged her to think about why she wanted to go to school. So coming back to career goals, what is it that she was looking to do? And in the course of this, she really decided that she wanted kind of a solid reputation, and a strong curriculum, and collaboration from a school spirit was important to her. So she's been admitted to Ross with a scholarship, UCLA, and waiting on Kellogg, and these are all really a much better fit for her than the environment that she was originally looking at Columbia. All right, sorry, toggling between. All right, so curriculum. So going back to career goals, in defining your career goals, it allows you to look more specifically at the curriculum of a school to see how they can help you through, achieve the goal that you are looking for. So, look at the concentrations, the majors, the certificates of a school. For example, Wharton has the healthcare management major, which is well known from a healthcare perspective. Berkeley just released last year a sustainability certificate. There are more and more programs that are building data analytics and kind of concentrations in data analytics. So, for example, if you were, let's go back to kind of my original example of you're in finance and you're looking to pivot into kind of fintech product marketing or product management, you would be looking for what does the product management curriculum look like? What kind of resources or clubs or to get involved to really kind of work within product management and develop that experience so that you can pivot, you use the resources to pivot. Another thing to think about is how the core is delivered. So many of you may know there's schools that are more case-based. So you receive a case and the entire learning is it involves discussing that case. So you're learning finance, accounting, marketing, all through kind of the case methodology. And the kind of the other side is having completely lecture based with experiential learning in between. So how do you want to receive the information? What's your best learning style? Do you like having the discussions of a case? Do you want that all the time, or would you like a balance of that? Would you like some kind of core curriculum that's academically kind of lecture, but interactive lecture? There's no kind of just lecture-based classes anymore, I don't think, at a business school. But are you looking more kind of a lecture interaction, experiential learning versus a case-based environment? So these are ways that you can identify, as you're researching schools, which type of curriculum is going to be best for you. So here is someone that had curriculum kind of has come into her thought process as she is weighing a couple wait lists. So she applied this last fall. She's been admitted to UCLA and Stern, and she's on the wait list, which we've seen wait lists grow this and last year specifically, but she's on the wait list for Hauser Booth. And she was trying to decide, okay, I want to stay on one of these wait lists, but not the other. And she is looking to, she's coming from consulting and really looking to move into technology, but she has some questions as to kind of whether she wants to go technology strategy or technology consulting. And so she was looking for a curriculum that was a little bit more of a path that she could take and would kind of give her the opportunity to sit in a number of classes to help her determine which path she wanted to take. And, Haas has a core curriculum that, the first semester you're taking a set schedule of classes, of accounting, corporate accounting, finance, marketing, operations, all kind of the basic business functions. And then you get to move into electives. Booth, on the other hand, one of the beauties of Booth is it has an extremely flexible curriculum. But for her, she was looking for something that was a little bit more of a path that she could follow to begin with, to determine her own path. And so she decided to stay on the wait list at Haas and not Booth, just because it would give her that structure. All right, on to our third C, clubs. So one of the things that I think is so unique and special about business school in general is that you will do so much of your learning within the clubs and the conferences that you get involved in. So, when you are doing your research and talking with students, really understanding what is it that you want to get involved in. So, say you're making the finance to fintech pivot. There's for sure a finance club. There's probably a fintech club. Are there, is there there might even be some incubators at the school or kind of startup support that is working with small fintechs that maybe you could get involved in. And so this is really thinking of what resources outside the classroom does a school offer so that you can do the learning outside of the club. This is also important when it comes to recruiting because, say you're involved in the finance club on campus and, you're looking to move into a fintech that is trying to expand the reach of kind of, financial management to maybe underserved populations. So you could create a panel for the club and connect with different industry leaders, pull them into a panel, which, these days is so much easier with Zoom. That used to be kind of more of a geographical thing to do before, but now you can pull people in on Zoom as well and get people across the world, leaders across the world. And this allows, number one, you to make the connections with these companies that potentially you would want to work for down the road. But also, you are creating value for, you're bringing value to yourself because you're learning, but you're bringing value to the class. And this is, I just think it's a great example of kind of the learning that can happen through clubs and the learning that also then, will help you from a career perspective, making a career pivot. So an example here is, so this is a client of mine from a couple years ago, and she was making a very big change. She was moving from, she was in retail, kind of e-commerce retail, and her family had a real estate business. And so she wanted to use the MBA to make the pivot. This is a pretty big change. And had she, just kind of a small aside on career changes, part of what you want to be able to do is explain why the career change. So, the fact that her family was in real estate and she wanted to, she had been in the working world for a couple of years and wanted to take the opportunity to leverage the MBA to pivot back into her family business. She was able to kind of explain that why on such a big change. But from a club perspective, how this applies to clubs is because she was making such a big change, she spent a lot of time reaching out to the real estate clubs at different schools to understand, what they had going on, how she could get involved. It was, she then leveraged those connections to just learn about the culture of the school and the curriculum in real estate and how she would get involved. And she, so there are kind of a number of real estate schools on the West Coast and on the East Coast. She ended up at Berkeley Haas, which has a very strong real estate program, and had a number of scholarships along the way. And part of what I think was her kind of X factor, because it was really these connections that she made and really understanding, with the large move that she was talking about, she really showed that she took the time to understand what was going on in that school and could clearly articulate how the Fisher Center for Real Estate and Urban Planning at Berkeley could help her in her goals and how she was going to contribute back by getting involved in the real estate conferences and things like that. So, there are so many clubs that will reinforce kind of your goals. There's a small, so there's different types of clubs, right? There's the professional clubs. Then you have affinity clubs, so maybe a Women in Business or the Asian Business Association. And then you have, we'll call them social clubs, fun clubs. If you're a foodie, there might be a food and wine club, or if you play soccer, there might be an intramural football soccer team, and this can be another great way to, as you're identifying ways to connect with people at schools, finding a common interest, if it's not professionally based, can also, if it's a love of football or a love of food, can also be a great way to connect with people. Getting involved in clubs like that can also really help you meet people across different industries. So, when you get involved in an industry-based club, there's going to be a lot of people focused on that industry, but part of the benefit of business school is to sit in classes and have discussions with people from all industries and all functions. And so some of these social clubs can be a great way to kind of cross those barriers that and get to know what's going on in different areas. So we have a question from Naveen, who is interested in moving into the automobile industry, and asking what schools might cater to that. So immediately what comes to mind is Michigan, Ross, only because it is so close to the automotive industry in the US, if we're talking about US-based schools. But I think another great thing to do is look at employment reports for the schools. So who is recruiting, or where are different automotive industry companies that you're interested in recruiting? So, if it's something like a Tesla, Tesla is also pulling people from, Harvard, Stanford, Wharton, Haas, Michigan. So it kind of depends on where in the automotive industry you want to go. But looking at the employment reports of a school can really be helpful from that standpoint. All right, on to the next C, culture. So culture, and this means kind of the feel of a school. All schools, all business schools are collaborative in nature, right? We work on teams. That's how we business school is about pulling together different functions and helping different functions work together. But there can be a different vibe, let's call it that, at each school. So, think about what type of culture or kind of living environment you want to have at school. So, there might be, we kind of call it a khakis, or like a more of a business, might come to class in kind of a button-down shirt and khakis, which are kind of, dress pants. Or there's flip-flop culture, which is, coming to school in sandals and shorts. And the best way to really understand this is having conversations with students. Some people will want to put themselves outside of their comfort zone. So they may be looking for a culture different than what they had been in the past. And some people, know they want to be, I want to be in a super collaborative culture where kind of rising tide rises, or I'm saying that quote wrong, but anyways, all boats rise with the rising tide, right? Everyone there to help each other. And there are some schools that have that uber collaborative nature. And then there are other schools that, you work together on teams all the time, but there's going to be a little bit more of an individual kind of push in addition to kind of the overall culture. So I just want to spend a minute here talking about, well, I think communication is actually our next. So real quick on culture, this was a client that I worked with last year who's now at Michigan. She applied through a group called the Consortium, which is the goal of the consortium is to increase representation in underrepresented minorities. She wanted to go into consulting post MBA, which is a very common goal. And so there were many schools that were going to help her get there. In the end, she was accepted to Duke, Michigan, and Tuck, and was having a really hard time, because I would say all of these schools, you would call them uber collaborative. She was from Los Angeles, so for those of you that aren't familiar with the U.S., it's on the far west coast of the U.S. And her family was all based there. She was very close with her family, but when she went into this process, she really Tuck, which is Dartmouth, which is in the far northeast coast and a little bit kind of out. It's about 2 hours outside of a major city, Boston. That was her top choice. And so she went, once she kind of knew where she was, or from an acceptance perspective, she actually visited each of the schools. And while she loved each school, she really felt that Michigan was going to be the best place for her. She was just felt at home, and visiting campus now that we are kind of post-COVID, it is not required by any stretch. I think that's changed a lot through COVID. Schools understand, number one, how hard it is to get there, especially if you're living overseas. But that's where having conversations with people can really give you a feel for what the culture is like within each of these schools. All right, we've got a couple of questions over here we'll pause for. So I'm in the tech industry in Japan and will come back to my company to get promoted. I value a collaborative culture as an international student. Which are your recommendations? So, if you're focused on technology and collaboration, there are a couple schools that I'd suggest taking a look at. There's, again, all schools are collaborative in nature, or cooperative, I would say. So, Haas, from a tech perspective, being close to Silicon Valley, Stanford, obviously as well. Michigan Ross actually has a strong technology. They have a very strong engineering school, and so they have strong technology and kind of a tie to tech on both the east and west coast of the U.S. that gives you, Booth and Kellogg, and then MIT on the east coast, Duke, and Harvard and Wharton would say that they're tied to technology as well. But there are some that you can take a look at. All schools are going to, technology is something that all schools are leaning into. Arguably, they, we're a little late to the game at one point, but now they're all racing to catch up. Technology is changing so fast, and so they're trying to keep their classes. But I think if you look at the technology centers, and if we're talking about the U.S., you have San Francisco, New York, Chicago, and actually Austin down in Texas is becoming a bigger hub for technology as well. Haresh, hi, I'm working in the public sector in India, dealing with oil marketing. You've got 10 years of experience and want to go with your MBA, but we could confuse which program to go for. So 10 years of experience there's two things to think about. One is the type of MBA that you want to go for. The other is kind of which specific program. From a type perspective, you've got full-time program, which generally, and those are mostly 2-year, but there are a couple 1-year programs that we can talk about as well. And that, the kind of middle 80% of range is 3 to 8 years of experience. Part-time programs, as I have said before, it's kind of 5 to 15 years of experience, but I'm guessing if you're in India and you want to come to the US or even Europe, part-time isn't going to work because that's a long commute. There are executive programs that you'd be kind of in the middle. Some executive programs may take people with 10 years of experience. But if you are looking for a full-time experience, you may want to look at the 1-year programs that are out there. There are both MIT and Stanford have fellows programs that sometimes they're looking for up to 15 years of closer to 15 years of experience. Part of what you need to be able to answer is kind of why now is the right time for you. The other programs that have kind of 1-year experiences or 1-year programs that tend to be a little bit more open to a higher years of experience would be Kellogg has a 1-year program. Emory has a 1-year program. Kellogg actually has 2 different 1-year programs. One is a little bit more focused on tech, and the other is focused on general management. And then both Cornell and NYU have tech MBAs, which I'm not sure, on the oil marketing in the public sector, I'm not sure the tech MBAs would be the right for you, but that they are a year and tend to kind of accept people with a little bit more years of experience. All right, let's see. We've got one more question, then we'll keep moving, and then we'll come back to questions. Harasama is a military officer looking to go MBA post-service. Thank you for your service. To help switch back from leadership management in the Navy back to the business realm back home in New York. Broad tips. All right. So number one, we have a webinar coming up that's focused on military officers that you should take a look at. You can go to our website and sign up. I think it's next week. That would be a great, just great for you to be able to look at. I worked with someone actually transitioning out of the Navy this year. Part of what I think you need to think about is what it is you want to transition into. So as we talked about career goals in the beginning, that will help you. You will obviously come with a lot of leadership experience, a lot of experience in general from the Navy. But part of what you're going to need to articulate is what you're looking for from the MBA. An MBA is very typical for kind of exit military people to transition into kind of civilian work. And they love military applicants. But what they're going to want to know is what you're looking to do. So, I think obviously put in our consult link in the beginning might be helpful to talk a little bit more about your experience in general. But, I'd spend some time thinking about what you're looking to do. Most schools can help land you back in New York. There's even even some of the schools on the West Coast and the Midwest have strong ties to New York. So from a thank you for adding that in, geography perspective, I think that you've got a lot of options there. All right, let's keep working through our C's. Okay, communication. This is the one I was trying to cheat towards anyways. So communication is really about kind of this connection with schools that we talked about. Connecting with students, connecting with alumni, connecting with admissions can be difficult. One of the things that through COVID, schools have tried really hard to do is get as many resources as possible online. So I have kind of an internal rule of thumb that you should be officially engaging with a school in 3 different ways at minimum. And that's something that they can track, now that they can track everything. They can track the emails that you open, but it's a little bit more of 3 webinars or coffee chats or some way that you've interacted with the school. So maybe the first one is a general webinar on the school. Maybe the second one is more industry specific. If they have a specific webinar on social impact and how they've helped transition people to social impact, or consulting, or or product management. And maybe the third is doing an admissions or a coffee chat that's a little bit smaller, that you might be able to get questions answered or kind of hear from other people's questions. So that's kind of on the official side of communication. But then there's a layer underneath it, which is talking with students. And part of the goal of your conversation with these students is to identify some of the C's that we talked about before: the culture, the curriculum, the clubs. It is easy to get online and see, most schools have their course catalog online. So yes, you can see the list of classes and they're going to have a listing of all of their clubs, but you're trying to get one layer deeper within these conversations. You want to understand what type of projects are you doing in the class that's actually going to help you. With a club, what's going on in that club? So let's go back to the fintech example from earlier. If is there, we talked about the panel example, is there someone who is pulling together panels for this club, for the club, looking at different areas of fintech. Maybe it's kind of the product manager, bringing a bunch of product managers in from fintech to speak. Maybe it's bringing in Series A startups to understand kind of the very foundation, or even angel investing, where people are very small. So thinking about what it is, where you want to go with your career, and how in a club or a conference or an incubator or experiential learning opportunity, how you're going to contribute, but also what you hope to do to get out of it. And so, a perfect statement, where does this translate, I think, is another thing that's helpful to talk about is, there are specific essays where, so for example, Stanford's Why Stanford essay, Wharton's What Resources Are You Going to Use essay, Booth's essentially What Resources. We think of these as kind of goals essays, and they're looking for what is it that you're trying to get out of an MBA, and what resources does that specific school have that's going to help you. And so you don't want to just laundry list resources, because anyone could look at the class, course catalog and figure out a class. But maybe a statement you're working towards is, I am looking forward to a product development class so that I can understand where in the product development cycle I can be more inclusive to additional types of consumers who aren't being reached by current fintech companies. So you're trying to tie a specific learning that you personally want to have, with a class or club or experiential learning. And that's what makes these essays, which could come across as very bland, isn't the word, but if you're just talking about at a high level what it is you want to learn, and what's great about that school. It's something that anybody could say. You really are looking through these conversations and through this communication with schools is to get to a layer so that you can make these essays very personal to you. What is it you want to learn from this class, and how's it going to help you in your career, and how can you contribute based on the leadership or the experiences that you've had in the past. So, so here is one other example here. This was someone who her test scores were probably below the average. So Duke was I wouldn't call it it was kind of a stretchy target for her. And part of what we spent a lot of time with her doing was really understanding what she was looking for from the MBA. And then she took that and really kind of went all out effort on communication and reaching out to she applied to a number of schools, but Duke was her top choice. Really reaching out and understanding what was going on in those clubs. She used, so how are different ways that you can reach out? Maybe that's a good thing to bring out here is, I had one client that she self-admitted she was a LinkedIn stalker. She'd get in and you can search on LinkedIn. You can search a goal. You can search a specific school. And you can find people that have, either a similar background or a similar goal, or maybe a similar school. You could put in McKinsey, Michigan Ross, and see who has gone to McKinsey from Michigan Ross. You can, and so these are, this can be a pretty kind of cold email. You're reaching out via LinkedIn, but spending the time to understand kind of what their trajectory was and how it might mimic yours. Don't just send a connection. Add, generally you have, I don't know, I think it's like 200 characters that you can add a little note, make it personal. That's going to be more likely that someone is going to respond to you. Often schools in their clubs actually list their leadership. So you can send an email to the leadership of the club that you're interested in. And then also look at, the alumni database of the undergraduate university you went to. Maybe there are some connections that you can look at there. Are there people at your current company that have gone to different schools, and you can kind of leverage those connections? And are there people personally, or that that have gone to these schools? And sometimes that first conversation isn't getting you the information, the kind of goal-oriented information that you're looking for, but maybe it's a good culture read and understanding kind of why this person who you might know a little bit better likes this school. And this is, again, where career goals can come in really helpful, is if they don't know about the FinTech Club, if you can articulate your goals to that person, you can ask them to connect you with someone else. If you don't know your goals, it is difficult for someone to know how to help you in kind of move along a conversation. So kind of the more specific you can be, the more helpful students that you're talking to can be. All right, and our final C, costs. So something we get asked a lot about, which is, how do I help fund my MBA, which is, arguably the largest investment, maybe outside of purchasing a home, that many people will have. We see more significant scholarships. This kind of goes back to the first C, being competitiveness. We see larger scholarships at school for individuals that are applying to schools that they are extremely competitive at. So, business schools leverage scholarships to make themselves sticky, right? They're offering people scholarships because they want them to come. So this, there are different aspects to competitiveness other than just kind of a GMAT or GRE score and a test score. For example, Tepper, which is Carnegie Mellon, their business school has historically had a low percentage of females. Many schools are trying to get to parity. Wharton was the first one that got there, and now everyone else is trying to race to get there. And I think it was 2 years ago, they only had 20% women in their class. So they are working, they're working hard to attract more women to their class. So, we have seen larger scholarships from Carnegie Mellon for women. And so, if funding is something that's important, it's looking at, some of these different aspects. There are some schools that don't get as many international applicants. So it's looking for where, if you're in a country that is a unique country, where might your perspective be valued more? All right. So this is a little bit example of the TEPR. So this is someone that I worked with this year who, she, interestingly enough, so she ended up with a couple different offers across TEPR, Johnson, and Tuck. And while she was in the process, TEPR actually upped her scholarship. And then she used that to go back and leverage some scholarship from Tuck, which she did not receive. It was not equal, but that's another thing to think about from a cost perspective and why it might be beneficial to have a safety school on your list that you might get some significant funding from. It's unlikely that you're going to get the same funding from, say, a slightly higher ranked or more competitive program, but it might help you get some funding. So just something to think through. All right, Akshay's got some, he's got a brother at TEPR. Awesome. I love TEPR. I have an MBA crush on TEPR. All right, so 4.5 years of work experience in healthcare, reporting to the chairman of an organization, and work on strategies. You were a frontline worker during COVID. Thank you for that. And research. Okay, electrical and communications engineering. Okay, so lower GPA. So you didn't tell me what that was, but that's fine. I guess what I'd be curious in is, and maybe I'm, it somewhat depends on your goals, right? Are you looking to stay in healthcare, leverage your engineering background? So actually, I'd love to know a little bit. Okay, thank you, 6'8" or 6'18". So if you can tell me a little bit more about what you're looking to do, I think that I can help, because that, again, as we started with career goals, a lot of that ties to what might be a good program for you. Before we jump into kind of how Stratus can help, or well, maybe actually it's writing and telling me what his career goals are. I'll give you a little bit here, and then we'll come back and answer what other questions there are. So as I mentioned, Stratus we have a team-based approach. You have your own counselor, but then that counselor pulls in a strategist to provide feedback, a school-specific reviewer of your essays, and then we have a proofreader. If you work with us on 4 or more schools, then if you are not accepted to any of those schools in round 1, then we will work with you on an additional 2 schools in round 2. That's just from round 1 to round 2. It is, I think Abhijit had our consult link up there before. We offer free consults, and sometimes it's just great to understand the details behind you. Thank you for putting it up there again. The details behind your story, because then we can get much more specific. All right, it's a little bit of our success last year we had, and this is actually going up. This was from a couple weeks ago. I think we're closer to $10 million in scholarships now. And here are just, there's a QR code for our free consultation, but upcoming events, actually, who was it? Hasama, that link will get you to the military webinar as well. And then we have free guides for each of the schools that you can use these QR codes to get to. All right, Akshay, thank you. So looking to go on the business side from healthcare. So what I would suggest you look at is, like, if healthcare is your expertise and you want to pivot into maybe more the, okay, healthcare consultancy. Yeah, so the good news is just about any school is going to help you get into consulting. And there are specific healthcare, Mercer, ZS Associates. There are going to be some specific consulting firms that are a little bit more healthcare focused, but all major consulting firms have a healthcare arm to them as well. So, I would think about with your lower GPA, a test score is probably going to be more important for you. So GMAT, GRE, and being able to kind of show your ability to handle the academic rigor. I mean, coming from an engineering background, right? Schools know that the Indian curriculum in general is challenging, and that a 618 doesn't, you can't just convert that to a 4-point scale. It doesn't work that way. So schools know that, but they're going to be looking for kind of evidence as to your ability to handle the academic rigor of the program. You mentioned your brother's at Tepper. I think that would be a great school for you. Depending upon where your test score is, it would be kind of talking through kind of what might be a target safety stretch for you. Other schools that have a healthcare focus that I think would also kind of open up for consulting might be Haas has a strong MPH program, which is Masters in Public Health, which you don't necessarily have to take, but it just shows that the school has, a strong presence in healthcare. There's a lot of healthcare up in Boston. MIT and Harvard might be, with your 618 is probably going to be a super stretch for you. But the other area where we see a lot of healthcare is in Research Triangle, which is UNC, Duke, and NC State. But from an MBA perspective, Duke and UNC. Emory in Atlanta is another school that has a very strong pipeline to consulting, and the CDC, the Center for Disease Control in the U.S., is based in Emory. So there's a lot of healthcare going on. CDC is based in Atlanta. Emory is also based in Atlanta. So that, Michigan is another one. They have a really big medical school. These are all schools that I think would put you on a strong path. Cornell would be another one. They've got a strong medical school. So those are all ones that you could take a look at. Some information related to a PhD application. So this, Kazi, this somewhat depends on what type of PhD. If it's a business school PhD application, I would say, much of what we talked about will pertain. I think with PhD applications, what I see is there is a stronger need to make connections with the school itself. So, talking with a professor that you might want to do research with, that doesn't typically happen in an MBA application. You're not connecting with professors directly. You may, if you have an extreme interest and you love their research, but as a part of a PhD, you're doing research and you're working with a professor, and generally are kind of sponsored through a professor. So it's, understanding the research that's being done, trying to connect with some professors that are doing that research. I think that so if we think about, competitiveness, looking at the experience that you bring to the table within kind of the area of PhD that you're looking at, and kind of being able to explain how your skill set is going to further the research that you're interested in doing with that professor. Curriculum, how are you going to engage with the curriculum? What, often, in addition to research, you end up doing some teaching as a part of a PhD. So, what might you be able to contribute as a kind of a professor, a TA or a adjunct professor, and then from a culture perspective, much like an MBA program, different schools are going to have have different cultures. So and I think talking with the professors and current PhD students would give you a feel. If you want to tell me what type of PhD, then I might be able to be more helpful there. So Massima, you're looking at Columbia and going into management consulting. Okay. So if you were looking at Columbia, the one thing that is different and unique about Columbia than other schools is most business schools, you apply either round 1, round 2, round 3. Some have like a little round 4 or 5 in there. But generally you're applying either in September, in January, and then round 3 is generally April-ish timeframe. Columbia does something they call early decision. So if you apply, and you can apply as early as generally July is when they release their application. The earlier you apply, if you're essentially saying, I'm applying, and if you accept me, I will come. And there is a higher, So you're early on in the research. Okay, cool. So let me just finish the Columbia, and then we can come back to kind of things that you might be thinking about. But with Columbia, if you are willing to say, okay, if you let me in, I'm coming, then, and it's your top school, then, applying early decision can be great because there's a higher acceptance rate out of early decision versus a regular decision. Now, if you're excited about Columbia, but it's not your top choice, then you should apply regular decision. We still have plenty of people who get in regular decision. But it's, if you are kind of a Columbia or bust person after you've done your research, then ED can be a great way to signal that to the school, and also potentially increase your likelihood. So Masama, it looks like that you are a couple years out. So I love that you are doing this research now and starting to think about this now. I would spend time, connecting with people at Columbia, looking at other schools that, are going to be able, as I said, many schools are going to help you pivot into consulting. So it's a little bit of, understanding your undergraduate experience, and then kind of, maybe what region. It sounds like you want to get back to New York eventually, but there's a lot of places on the East Coast that can get you back to New York. So doing research, and most schools are going to have a management consulting club. So connecting with them, most schools are also going to have a veterans club. So connecting with the veterans club, my client from this year really found the veterans clubs at each of the schools extremely helpful in just, connecting with other people that have made the same transition. And so, those would be great places to start from a research perspective. All right. I'm wondering if anybody else has any other questions. I can hold for a minute or two to see. And if not, just want to say thank you so much for joining me today. I hope this gave you some ideas on how you can be thinking about your school research and developing a list of schools that is going to work for you. We love having more individual conversations. About your profile. Again, these are free consultations, but it just helps us answer your questions and ask some more questions a little bit. I'm going to answer Rain's question about J-term real quick, and then I'll come back to you, Kazi. So J-term is also something unique at Columbia. J-term is essentially a condensed program. So you start where a typical 2-year class starts in August and then you kind of go through 2 years of school. J term starts in January, and you have a year and a half of school. The perceived downside of J term tends to be that you go to school through the summer, so you don't have the opportunity to have the same internship that you might in a 2-year program. However, having many clients that have gone to Columbia, one of the things that Columbia is fantastic at is, or students have access to at Columbia, is having intern internships. So I have a client who he just finished his first year, and he worked at 3 different companies through that year. And some of the internships were unpaid, some were paid, but he'd spend 2 or 3 months working with them, understanding what was going on there. These are things that if he wanted to, he could put on his resume that would help make that transition. J term it's condensed from I think the way it works is you end up January through the following August. So you start in January through the following August, you have kind of a condensed time frame. And then you join a second year class. So you're kind of condensing your first year, which is why you don't get an internship. But then you graduate with kind of the same degree. So I hope that answers that question. PhD in marketing and management, especially in Canada. So many amazing schools in Canada. This is where I would, depending upon the type of research that you're hoping to do in the marketing or management area, is really, looking at the professors at those schools and reaching out and connecting, talking with other PhD students. The PhD process tends to be, it's a statement of purpose. Some schools have specific essays, but more often than not, it's a little bit more of a kind of a general statement of purpose. And often they're looking for examples of your writing. So if you've been published before, or if not, they're looking for kind of your writing quality, because being published is often a large part of that research. And then, and while this isn't often written in the requirements, I've talked about the connections. I do think it's important to have connections, reach out to those professors so that you understand, are they taking on PhD students? Are they, and really kind of understanding where you would fit kind of within their school. When saying, all right, considering Tepper because they have an emphasis on analytics. Yeah. Is Tepper really better than our others as famous for tech and computer science? So Tepper is an amazing school from a technology perspective. Their Carnegie Mellon, which is the university, kind of the general university that Tepper is within, is a hotbed for innovation, entrepreneurship, and technology, kind of within the US. And so that really bleeds over into kind of Tepper, the business school. Is it better than others? I think it kind of depends on what you're looking for. And, from a career perspective, also where you want to be post MBA. I think spending time with the employment report of Tepper would help you see where people are graduating into. I think more and more schools are trying to lean into analytics. I think Duke just added, I think it was a certificate in analytics. There are also often NYU, I think it was NYU. I just got an email from, I'm on all these email lists. They blend in my head, but there are masters in analytics. So, part of what you might want to ask yourself is, do you need an MBA, or would a master's in analytics, which is probably going to be 1 year versus 2, help you with where you want to grow from an analytics perspective? So that's just something to think. Tepper is an amazing school. I don't like to say better, because I think it really just depends on your goals and kind of the profile that you have there. One other question from Rain, family business backgrounds. Okay, so I'm working with someone right now who's looking at family business, and there are so many schools that have that try to cater to family business. Schools that jump out to me. Cornell has a very strong family business program. The client I'm working with is applying to MIT, and he's kind of helped me uncover resources. Harvard has a strong family business. UNC Keenan-Flagler also has a very strong family business kind of a background and backbone. So those are, I think there are two ways you can think about family business depending upon where your family business is at. I think you could also be looking at entrepreneurship resources, right? If it's a smaller business that you're hoping to grow, then yes, look at family business, but also look at entrepreneurship and see kind of what resources there might be. If it is a larger family business that you're looking to grow, then you may want to look at kind of privately owned mid-sized companies and just kind of look at the resources for there as well. But hopefully that helps. Sarthak, looking for a career change is a math. So should you consider a master's or an MBA for a career change? I think it depends on what the change is. A little bit here. It depends. If you can find a master's that you could be competitive at, that is going to place you where you want to be, then, most master's programs, and this isn't all, but many master's programs are just a year. So it's 1 year less of schooling, 1 year less of paying, and you're back, into hopefully what you want to be doing. Sometime, depending upon how big of a career change it is where an MBA or a 2-year master's can be helpful. Is sometimes getting that experience, that internship in the middle of the 2 years can be kind of fundamental to helping you make a change, where then you can actually say you have experience in something when you're applying for a full-time job. So kind of depend on how big the change is and kind of where you're looking to go. So good GMAT score to compensate for your low GPA. So targets are, so really you actually what you should do is look at the schools that you're interested in. Generally what we see is kind of Indian male nationals tend to score about 20 or 30 points above the average that you're going to see at a school. So that just kind of puts you, gives you a range to think about. And then, you're going to want to hit within the range, arguably, above the average of the schools that you're looking at. Because the good news is your Indian GPA or CGPA isn't calculated in the school's average 4-point that they kind of put in that are in the rankings and they put on their site. So really what you're trying to do is help show them that you can handle the academic rigor of the program. Again, engineering is going to help that in some way. Another thing for you to think about, depending upon where your GMAT score would come up, is potentially taking a course that you could point to, that you could say, hey, look at this recent course that I took and look at how well I did. There are a couple of great math for management courses. UCLA and UC Berkeley both have one that are online, so you can do them from anywhere in the world. And they really are geared towards kind of the math that you need to know for a business school. And so, when I have clients that don't have the data available to show that they have, the quantitative rigor, or maybe an undergrad, didn't perform the way they had hoped. In addition to a test score, sometimes it's nice to show that you've taken a class and you've done well, and you can point to that class. I like the extension courses because they give you a grade, versus there's also something called MBA Math, which is a great course as well. MBA Math is pass-fail. And so, I think if you can point to a grade and say, hey, look how well I did in this course, it just is a little bit stronger if you're trying to build data to show your kind of academic success. All right. Well, once again, I want to say thank you to everyone, and look forward to, please sign up if you would like, and for a consultation. If not, wish you all the best of luck through your process. Take care. Bye-bye.